Sometimes even good people can make a mistake. And when it happens, it's one of the most intense and emotional experiences of your life. It could be a DUI, or maybe you were in the wrong place with the wrong people at the wrong time. Or perhaps you just did something stupid at the spur of the moment without even thinking, and now you're in trouble with the law. Well, you need experienced legal help right away so you don't become a victim of the criminal justice system. Even good people can make a mistake, and if you, a friend, or loved one has been accused of a crime, don't make another mistake by hiring the wrong attorney for the kind of help you need. You need to visit toddjohnslaw.com. That's toddjohnslaw.com, and then call Attorney Todd Johns today. Attorney Todd Johns has decades of experience helping good people like you who have made mistakes or bad decisions and will stand by you every step of the way. toddjohnslaw.com.
Out of you. I am your host, Bill Rader, and joining me is my co-host, Sean Kane. Sean, how you doing this week?
Billy Raids, what's up, buddy?
We're doing pretty good. We have a very special episode this week with two great guests, two returning guests to the program. We have Mark Adamczyk, who has joined us before, and also Matt Crumpton, who has, I believe, joined us a couple of times before.
Yeah, I think so.
On the program. Yeah. So welcome back, guys. Great to have you back on the show.
Good to be here.
Thanks. Should be a good talk tonight.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, Sean, let's not waste any time. Let's get right into it.
Let's get into it. So what I want to do is I want to do a deep dive in New Orleans, but specifically on two characters that are definitely suspicious in the JFK assassination. And that's Guy Bannister, David Ferrie. And of course, both of them have been made infamous in the great classic movie Oliver Stone's JFK. Ed Asner played Guy Bannister, and of course the great Joe Pesci played David Ferrie. But the importance of these two guys, and Matt and Mark, I think you'll agree with me, is if you connect Oswald to Bannister and Ferrie in any way, shape, or form, I mean, it kind of destroys the fact that they try to paint Oswald as a left-wing communist, because Ferrie and Bannister were to the far right, anti-communist as could be. And it kind of goes to, you know, if you could connect them, then it proves that Oswald is an agent provocateur and some kind of double agent instead of just a left-wing communist. So I want to get into these guys. I want to do a real deep dive in, let's start in a background of Bannister and Ferrie. You can start with either one. I don't know who wants to start, Matt, Mark?
Yeah, probably... we can start with either one. You want to start with Bannister?
Let's start with Bannister, yeah.
All right. Yeah, I mean, he was he started his career in naval intelligence, which, that was during World War II.
Sure.
And then he became a cop before joining the FBI. He was all over the place. He was in Montana, Oklahoma City, Minneapolis. Right. But eventually he became the special agent in charge in Chicago.
Yes.
Now, I haven't gotten too far down the mafia road or any of that. That's really more of a season 3 thing that I'll be delving into. But you've got to think, he had some relationship or some at least knowledge of Sam Giancana and Jack Ruby's from Chicago. Ruby. Yeah,
Matt, let me ask you this though, because this is interesting. I'm looking into, and we're going to do a short on the road with Lisa Pease on this, but I'm looking into a lot on Robert Mayhew, because Robert Mayhew has a Chicago FBI tie, and so does another suspicious character, William Harvey, who would end up being running the ZR rifle program for the CIA. But Mayhew, Harvey, and Bannister all have ties to the FBI Chicago office. And have you ever found any overlapping connection at their time there at the FBI?
I am not sure. I didn't study a ton on Bannister's time in Chicago. I was more focused on what he was doing in New Orleans. But Mayhew's a big deal. He's Howard Hughes' right-hand man, and Mayhew is the one that really Nixon was working with to bring in the to coordinate with the CIA and the mafia. He turned to Mayhew.
Sure.
So I know that that he's a big name and he's a big player in the game of coordinating, the CIA with the mafia for the things they were doing in Cuba.
Yeah, really the birth of the assassination teams. They started late 50s, early 60s. That's the genesis of it. Yeah.
And not only that, I think Lisa Pease in her great book, she really nails Mayhew as the probable go-to guy in running the assassination against RFK and running that plan. So I always thought Mayhew interesting in what connection did he have to the JFK assassination? Kind of fill in the blanks between the mafia plots against Castro, the RFK assassination. What was he doing in between there? So that's what I'm looking into now. And you guys haven't really found anything.
I just haven't gotten to it yet. I will. I'll be going down that same deep road in the next few months.
Okay. So then from there, let's talk about Bannister's time at the FBI. What do you have on that, Matt?
So yeah, he was he made it to being the supervisor of the Chicago FBI. The main thing he did when he was at the FBI was basically he's spying on the activities of leftists.
Right, exactly.
So, it was his duty to work with informers, specifically people that were talking, Communist Party members and anybody that was, a leftist. It was sort of the era of infiltrating, not that era ever ended, I guess, but of infiltrating sort of outlier political groups, and that's kind of what Bannister headed up while he was at the FBI. He did a lot of other things too. I've heard uh Mark Ruber of America's Untold Stories talk about, some Bannister did some crazy thing. I don't remember where, but it like it maybe in South America that kind of got him in J. Edgar Hoover's good graces. But I haven't studied that myself, so I don't want to comment on it more.
Mark, anything you want to add on Bannister's FBI?
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking about this today. Obviously became special agent in charge of Chicago. Hoover apparently really liked him and his enthusiasm, and that's how he, moved up, from what I can tell, through the ranks. Yeah, Matt's, what's interesting is that when he eventually went back to New Orleans, he got a position with the New Orleans Police Department, ironically, looking into police corruption and internal affairs, if you will. But
That's
really,
funny.
like he was so obsessed with as an anti-communist, he was a member of any organization, the Minutemen, Birch Society, of those types of things. So he was very radical.
Yeah.
So when he did have a legitimate position with the NOPD, and then he got booted from there for erratic and extreme behavior, which we saw again with Jack Martin on November 22nd.
Yeah.
And so but here's another interesting thing. In early '63, him with Ferry went to work for a G. Ray Gill, who is Carlos Marcello's lawyer. So that to me is very interesting.
And what was the date and month that they start working for Grill?
As far as I can tell, sometime in early '63.
Okay. See, to me, this is the way I always looked at it. I always looked at it, how did they go to Grill? Like, did I always thought of the CIA maybe making the connection to Grill to have Bannister and Ferry help Grill out, which would connect Grill, because Grill we know is lawyer Marcello, so that would connect Bannister and Ferry to Marcello, and the CIA would always use contingency plans, and they would always use like patsies, and then down the road they would be able to blame the mafia. They would say, well, Bannister Ferry's not one of our guys, he's a mob guy. They're mob guys, and the thing is, if that connection wasn't until '63, I mean, that to me is kind of suspicious.
Well, I think the Bannister Ferry connection, but before the G. Ray Gill thing, it goes further back. So Bannister
to Ferry, right?
Yeah. Bannister set up his office in the Newman building in around 1960. We can talk about that building, of course. He helped David Ferry with his troubles with Eastern Airlines. and was
Right.
actually a character witness for him and that and his exit from Eastern Airlines for misconduct. So I think they became buddies, and then Ferry was seen a lot at the Newman Building where 544 Camp Street is, and I think all this just kind of evolved, you know.
Well, let's do a little bit on Ferry now. Matt, you want to start about who actually was David Ferry?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, he started working. He was at least working with G. Ray Gill in 1961, in August of 1961, because he had hired him to defend him in his, or hired him as an investigator
Okay.
in his attempt to defend himself from being fired from Eastern Airlines. And he kind of did like a barter, like he provided some investigation services for Bannister in exchange for Bannister providing investigative services for him, and he did the same thing for Gill. So
Right.
he's sort of bartering, and he's that connection point. David Ferry. So first of all, he's from Cleveland, which is where I went to high school, and he went to high school at St. Ignatius, which
Yeah,
is a football powerhouse
it
in
is. Yes.
Cleveland.
Yes.
And I went to the sixth biggest school in the state of Ohio, and I played football in high school. And every year we would go undefeated in our conference, and then we would lose by 38 points to St. Ignatius. So that was literally, 2 out of my 3 years that I actually played. We just got smoked by him. So, but anyway, that was kind of fun to see. He started out in his life, and it looked like he was going to go into the priesthood, and he kind of just kept running into a combination of his own shenanigans plus just being unruly, with the thing they call it now is uh, oppositional defiance disorder. That's what they call it for children. But he just didn't want to listen to anybody. That's a common thread with David Ferry. He goes to seminary. He gets thrown out basically because the priests said that he wasn't fit for it, not because he was gay, just because he wouldn't say sorry when he messed up, type of thing. He wouldn't respect authority. He learned how to fly while he was in the seminary, and he continued to use that. He ended up teaching at another Catholic school in Cleveland, Benedictine High School. And while he was there, that's when he really sort of ramped up his involvement with the Civil Air Patrol.
Yeah.
But he got booted from the Civil Air Patrol because he took these cadets to a brothel. And then he also flew a grounded plane from Columbus to Cleveland in 1948 with no lights. And then when he landed, he said he was an officer in the Air Force. So that's kind of, I mean, he's fun. You can't say he's not fun. But anyway, he finagles a transfer from Ohio to Louisiana with the Civil Air Patrol, and he gets a great job in New Orleans working for Eastern Airlines as a pilot. But his Civil Air Patrol transfer, they'd kicked him out of the Civil Air Patrol for all these things he did, and they lost his file when the Louisiana office called the Ohio office. They didn't have a file on it, so they couldn't say anything bad about him, which I thought was pretty interesting. There's no proof that he stole it, but nevertheless, it was missing. So he gets the job at Eastern Airlines, and yeah, he continues to serve as a cap instructor. And it's around this time so he moves in 1951 to New Orleans. 1955 is when Oswald is in the Civil Air Patrol.
Right.
Now, this is a show that goes super deep, so we'll go one level slightly deeper. He actually, in 1954, one of Ferry's cadets died in a plane crash, and he was then demoted from being a supervisor, and he was like a helper, like an off the books helper. So he wasn't actually the squad leader. He was just some sort of helper, but he had a simulation airplane cockpit in his apartment that, like, in the basement, that people would come over to. And yeah, this is when there's that picture of him and
Famous
Oswald
picture.
together.
Yeah.
Yeah, in 1955.
And Bill,
So
maybe you put that up when this airs. Put that picture up.
Yeah,
yeah,
sure.
and it's them at a cookout, and it's Oswald on one side of the photo and Ferry on another side of the photo, but there's about 12 people there. It's obvious that everybody in the group would know each other, and it's
Sure.
obvious that, he's a cadet. Now, the real question with Ferry and Oswald is, well, what's going on in 1963? Are they really, so in other words, the mere fact that we have absolute proof that they knew each other in 1955 doesn't prove that they were together in 1963, but there are a lot of witnesses who say they were. So then now we're back into the fun game that we always play, which is, which witnesses do you believe, right? And you throw some of them out, but I'm not the kind of guy that can just go, no, they're all wrong. Like once the numbers build up, you got to go, I don't know, there might be some fire where there's smoke.
And I want to throw in here, Mark, before we get to you. There's a famous picture too that supposedly was seen by Bob Tannenbaum, who I think is very reliable, of course, of the HSCA, and he said that he's seen at a training, Lake Pontchartrain, I believe it was. He saw a picture of David Atlee Phillips of the CIA, I believe Bannister, I believe Ferry, and Oswald. And Tannenbaum said he's seen that picture, so there's a direct connection, and that would have been probably the summer of '63, right, Matt? Somewhere around there, I believe.
Yeah, that's when it was. Yeah, definitely summer of '63, and Tannenbaum says he saw it, but it's not just him. There's also L.J. Delsa, who's an HSCA investigator, and Robert Groden, who's well known in the conspiracy community. He's the guy who used to hang out at the Dealey Plaza all the time, but far more importantly, he's the guy who broke the Zapruder film on Geraldo. So he's sort of sort of legendary in my view, regardless of, you may disagree with some of his substantive conclusions on the case. But I think that guy's pretty awesome, Robert Groden.
Sure.
But anyway, yeah. So there's two, and Tannenbaum went on to become the mayor of Beverly Hills, which is fun. It's like you're not gonna have like a tinfoil hat like Alex Jones type dude who's the mayor of Beverly Hills. Like, this is like a normal, reasonable guy who viewed this as a cold murder case, not like oh, there's people, whatever.
That's why they had to get rid of him.
Yeah.
So now that picture disappeared, correct? Nobody's seen that.
It was a film.
Or the film, I mean, it's
a film. Yeah, and it showed, what the film showed was Oswald, David Atlee Phillips, and Guy Bannister at this training camp. It didn't show Ferry with them, but
okay.
There are multiple witnesses that saw Ferry with Oswald.
Okay, Mark, anything you want to add?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Matt. I mean, it's undeniable in the 50s, mid 50s, there's former cadets in those cap units. Actually, Oswald, I think I'm right on this, was in one cap unit and then transferred to another camp that Ferry ran as sort of the rebel captain, and so there was a long history there. We know Oswald leaves, and then he has this time in the Soviet Union, comes back to Dallas, and then ends up back in New Orleans, I believe, in April of '63. It's possible they reunited there. Maybe Oswald was looking up his old Civil Air Patrol unit. That's what we call it, right? Looking them up, and by that time, Ferry was, not, with Eastern Airlines, and he was very much into the Cuban activities, and we know how that worked out for Oswald by August. So you got 544 Cam Street, where Ferry was known to be quite often, of course, matching up to the leaflets that Oswald was handing out on Canal Street. You have the Clinton-Jackson incident. We can get into that if you want, where multiple witnesses about 90 miles north of New Orleans saw Ferry, Shaw, and not Bannister, Ferry, Shaw, and Oswald there, doing various things. And then I think it's really important to remember, and this is why it's undeniable that Ferry had a significant connection to Oswald up until Dallas, is that what was he doing literally the couple days after the assassination? Well, he took the trip to Texas. We know about that. He was frantically going around New Orleans looking for a library card.
Yeah.
And he was frantically trying to call ex-cadets in the cap for any
Right.
pictures showing him and Oswald together. So,
Right.
I mean, that's remarkable.
Let's go into
Yeah.
more detail on that. Let's talk about that, the library card.
Well, he went to first of all, he went to his to Oswald's landlady's house, the next door neighbor, and asked if she knew anything about it. And then he went, her name was Jessie Garner. And then he went to where else did he go? Another neighbor down the street, Doris Eames.
Yeah.
And asked her, and then asked her husband, and her husband was like, I don't know, I saw him at the library one time, but I don't know. So, but what's funny is, you know, how all this conversation got started is that Oswald's roommate, Leighton Martin, not Oswald, David Ferry's roommate, Leighton Martin's, told Ferry that G. Ray Gill relayed a message that Ferry's library card was found among Oswald's effects. But when Ferry's going around asking these people, he's going, hey, do you know what kind of what card Oswald had? What kind of library card was Oswald using? In other words, was he using my card? Right? That's the question he's basically asking. And Garner testified to this under oath in the Garrison trial. And the Clay Shaw trial. And there's really, I don't think, a strong counterpoint for it. She wouldn't make it up. And she identified David Ferry. There's also Delphine Roberts, who's one of those witnesses that's like Jack Martin, lots of good reasons to discredit her. She was like, under today's standards, radically racist.
Yeah.
But
Communist.
yeah. So she said that she saw Oswald go with Ferry to a Cuban exile training camp one time. That matches with the film that Bob Tannenbaum and Robert Grodin and L.J. Delsa saw. We also have Ricardo Morales Jr. You ever heard of a guy named Monkey Morales? He's a Cuban exile.
I heard the name.
So his son, I met on Twitter, actually, and he's got a book coming out about his dad. But there's a couple articles in major newspapers. One of them in the Miami paper, where he comes out and he says, my dad told me that he was an instructor at these Cuban exile camps, which matches the historical record if you go to this guy's Wikipedia page. And he trained Oswald at one of the camps.
Wow.
So he's on the right, and his dad told him all this like right before he died. Which was not before he died. It wasn't like a deathbed confession. His dad died unrelated in 1981, and he had told his kids kind of what happened before.
Did he say anybody else who was there at the training camp besides Oswald?
I'm sure that's going to be in the book.
Okay.
But that was, that wasn't, but yeah, Ricardo Morales Jr. He's a good guy. I've talked to him a few times. And then Jack Martin says that he saw Oswald with David Ferry in Bannister's office multiple times. There's also this guy, Van Burns, who worked in a booth at Pontchartrain Beach, which was an amusement park in New Orleans.
Right. He saw Oswald Ferry.
Yeah, a friend introduced him to Oswald and David Ferry. And that same friend told him that Ferry had flown over the Gulf of Mexico, that he had been with Ferry when he went over the Gulf of Mexico, and that Ferry had flown to Cuba several times. There's also a guy named George Wilcox who lives near Betico Creek, about 50 miles north of New Orleans, and he says that he saw Oswald and Ferry basically dressed in military fatigues, doing military training maneuvers. So that's another person. You combine that with Ferry looking for the library card, which again, you got witnesses there who are testifying under oath.
Right.
I don't know, man. You just have to, the way that you can make this not be a problem is you just basically go, nah. Okay. And I don't mean that to be a jerk. I'm just saying you go, I don't believe any of them. I'm going to say they're all not credible. Oh, Jack Martin's a drunk. Oh, Delphine Roberts is racist. Oh, and then you find a reason to discredit each person. And then you go, oh, see, no problem. So let's move on. That seems to be the counter argument.
Let me ask you guys.
Go ahead, Billy.
Yeah, let me ask you guys something. The portrayal of Ferry in the movie, in Oliver Stone's movie, to your knowledge, because I don't know how much of that was done for dramatic effect. I mean, he really seemed to be just a wild character, eccentric, paranoid, just, and I'm sure a lot of that probably had to do with I guess there was drug use implied. I'm sure, there was plenty of that going on, but how, to your knowledge, how accurate was that portrayal?
Well, one thing is that Ferry was maniacal about the medicine, the treatments. He was at my alma mater. He was at Tulane all the time. He even lied to his cap cadets that he was, in the Tulane medical facility, which was a lie. But so that part in the movie with the rats and all the science lab that he had, set up in his so-called apartment was. I believe there's something to that was, there's obviously dramatic license in the movie, but he was big into that, and for sure.
I think I heard a recording of David Ferry's voice one time, and it's like high pitched. It's off-putting to hear compared to what it sounds nothing at all like Joe Pesci. But other than that, and we can't be there to know what happens. It's a dramatization, obviously historical fiction. Other than that, I can see why. First of all, I see why they casted Pesci, because he did a heck of a job, even really recreating that terrifying photo of Ferry with the painted on eyebrows, or he's just like,
he had a condition called alopecia.
He had alopecia, right.
Yeah.
But what's scary isn't the alopecia. What's scary is that he's like staring at. He just looks like he's just this like ominous figure. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Right.
And what I think they got right is that he had this energy about him. Okay. And I don't want to call it an optimism, but like a belief that he could make things happen. And like, so for example, he, when he's teaching at Benedictine High School, he writes a letter to, I think, the Navy, basically saying like, give me a commission and let me lead a group of men. So what are you talking about? You haven't even served in the Navy. Like, what are you talking about? He's just like, I'm great. I can do it. Damn it. Like, he's just like, he makes insane asks. So, that are documented. And then he also has a wild side where he made a lot of reckless choices. I think around I think what happened is he was, a closeted gay man in the 1950s, 60s. And the easiest way for him to, live his life that way was to kind of also be a pedophile and groom these boys. Right. I mean, truly, who knows, maybe he just would have been a regular gay dude, but that's kind of what he was doing. So he got in a lot of trouble, in this with Civil Air Patrol parents calling the cops because their kids aren't coming home because they're going to his house, kind of stuff.
He also got in trouble at Eastern Airlines, right? And Sergio Kacha Smith wrote him a letter on his behalf.
Yes, that's right. Go ahead, Mark.
And then did he, am I remembering this incorrectly? Did he have cancer?
No, he worked on he allegedly worked on basically like fast acting cancer. He was working on cancer research.
Oh, okay.
And we don't now this kid gets into like Dr. Mary Sherman and all that kind of stuff.
I don't know if we want to go down that angle.
Yeah, and I didn't, but here's what's true. What is indisputably true is that he did have a bunch of mice in his apartment. He did have this whole room that was set up for like science experiments. So, Judith Ferry Baker wasn't like kicking it on the couch smoking a J necessarily, but maybe she was. Who knows? Probably not.
Yeah, I don't want to get into that really. To be honest with you, but
DK's Corner has moved. Come see us in our brand new location at 201 Cherry Street in Jessup, Pennsylvania, right across from the Jessup Plaza. Enjoy a brand new menu with hot and cold sandwiches, soups, salads, pizza, delicious breakfast, including breakfast bowls and sandwiches, specialty coffees, and DK's famous Razzle Dazzle flavor shaken espressos, and still the best cheesesteaks around. Follow DK's Corner on Facebook and Instagram, or call them at 570-209-0278 to find out about their daily specials and catering. And DK's Corner now has beautiful outdoor seating for the summer. Don't feel like leaving the house? Call DK's Corner for delivery. And we thank DK's Corner for sponsoring That's Enough Out of You. DK's Corner, now in Jessup, Pennsylvania. Are you thinking about selling your house? Well, Bob Connors, a realtor at Christian Saunders Real Estate, says, I can't sell your house, but I sure as heck can market it and get it from sell to sold. Call Bob today for great marketing and to get a ton of eyeballs on your house. Are you in the market to buy a home? Not sure where to start? If it looks like something you shouldn't buy, Bob's going to tell you that. Think you can't buy a house or have no idea where to start? Been there, done that. Bob will get you going in the right direction. You can reach Bob at 570-614-3624 or 570-335-9000. And you can find Bob on Facebook at Bob Connors-Realtor. Whether you call Bob or not, please remember, stay awesome, all you awesome humans, and be kind to each other. Bob Connors, the realest real estater. And thanks to Bob Connors and Christian Saunders Real Estate for sponsoring That's Enough Out of You.
But now, what do you guys think of the portrayal of Ed Asner as Bannister?
You know, it's very good. I mean, it's very brief in the movie. We know he had an anger / drinking problem, all of it, all the way up through the FBI. And then, of course, that carried on to his time in the New Orleans Police Department. So then he eventually became a retired private investigator. You know, who's really, really key in thinking about this again was what Jack Martin, the guy that he pistol whipped on the evening of the assassination, which is in the opening scenes in the movie, right? It's
He's
all
played by Jack Lemmon in the movie.
Right. I mean, I'm not going to go as far to say Jack Martin's a hero, but he gave both the New Orleans Police Department, Garrison's office, and the FBI a lot of information about Ferry's activities those days right after. I mean, he was instrumental in learning about him early on. And so obviously there's a direct connection to Bannister there. He worked for him. Martin got all, suspicious the night of the assassination. And it was apparently, Bannister got crazy about his files, and then Bannister went berserk. So I think as far as I can tell in my research, that was pretty spot on.
Matt, anything on that you want to add?
No, yeah, I mean, I think Asner did a nice job. I think everybody did a good job in that movie. Now that I've learned more, I don't think the Garrison case is as strong of an argument as the movie lays it out to be. But I think what Garrison trial did is laid out all this evidence, created all this evidentiary record that really confirms a lot of the relationships and really tells us what Oswald was doing in New Orleans. But I wanted to just quickly say on David Ferrie, the reason he got fired from Eastern Airlines is because he was trying to impress one of his cadets once again, and he stole an airplane and went on a joyride, and he's all drunk, buzzing treetops, the whole way he's doing it. And when he gets back, the FAA was there waiting for him. That led to him being expelled from the Civil Air Patrol and eventually losing his job with Eastern Airlines. And that was compounded by the fact that he, in addition to this drunken joyriding, stealing a plane to impress a kid, he went into the New Orleans detention center saying he was a doctor for this kid and visited with this kid that was really just one of his, Civil Air Patrol cadets. And then at the same time, and they found out he wasn't really a doctor when what he was doing. At the same time, the parents of another boy complained to the police that, their kid was staying with Ferry. So he ended up getting charged with contributing to the delinquency of a juvenile and crimes against nature on a 15-year-old boy. Those were the charges against Ferry.
So let's get back to Bannister. So Bannister gets fired from the New Orleans Police Department. And then he starts this private detective agency, but they really don't do a lot of detective work. They're really his real role is spying on the communists, which is what he developed the skill in the FBI. And he has this legendary filing system.
Yeah.
And he really becomes I think, who was it that said he's a conduit to funds for the CIA, but he really becomes like this central figure in this war against Fidel Castro and in the communists. And he's running this all out of 544 Camp Street.
Yeah.
Let's talk about some of the activity that was going on there. The name I mentioned, Sergio Cacha Smith, was seen in that building. Let's talk about some of the people let's talk about Oswald being at that building. And I know, Matt, you did a good job in your podcast about whether he had an office there or whether he was using an empty office. I'm talking about Oswald, but to me, just if you could place him in there, it really doesn't matter whether he had the office or he was using an empty office. Just placing him in there,
Right.
ties him to this network. Let's talk about that.
Yeah. Mark, you want to go first? You mean to go ahead?
Well, yeah, we know Oswald was on record as having a job at Riley Coffee Company or something, which was a known hangout for intelligence activities.
Right.
Beginning to 544 Camp Street, so it shares a corner with Lafayette and Camp, same building. Bannister had his office there. We also should add, Sean, to the list of Bannister's activities, just the gun and weapons running. He essentially got full time into helping with providing weapons to the various anti-Castro groups in New Orleans and beyond. Right. So that a lot of that stuff went out of that office too. I know, I was reading something about Delphine Roberts, the secretary of Bannister, is very close to him, that we talked about earlier. She flat out testified and said that she saw this second floor office where she knew Oswald to be. She saw the leaflets, was very honest about that, and didn't really know. The owner of the building, the guy's name was Newman, he didn't know Oswald to have rented space from him. My best educated guess is his connections with Ferry and Bannister had been hanging out there for 2-3 years now. They just let him use an office as part of his pro-Castro legend that he was creating at their direction. He probably didn't know what he was doing half the time and for what purpose, but he was, as they called him, a useful idiot, right?
Right. So. Yeah, there is a lot of there are a lot of folks on the record saying that Oswald was at 544 Camp Street and that Oswald knew Bannister. So the easy ones, you got Delphine Roberts and Jack Martin, and that's who the HSCA talks about, and the HSCA discredits them. They don't mention any other witnesses. They go, Delphine Roberts is iffy and inconsistent. Jack Martin's a drunk, but they say this. That's kind of how the HSCA covers it. But there's actually a lot more witnesses. There's Michael Kurtz. He says that he saw Oswald with Bannister when Bannister was debating students at LSU about integration in May of 1963. If so, that would indicate that Oswald was hanging out with Bannister while he was still at Riley Coffee Company, before he was, before he left Riley. Then you also have, let's see, Vernon Gerdes, who worked for Bannister, told his attorney that he saw Ferry and Oswald together with Guy Bannister. Tommy Baumler, a student who worked with Bannister to infiltrate left-wing college groups, also says that there's no doubt that Oswald worked for Bannister. Mm-hmm. And then David Lewis, another former Bannister investigator, says that he saw Oswald eating lunch at Mancuso's restaurant with Sergio Arcacho Smith. So he didn't see him with Bannister. You're talking about Arcacho Smith. One of the things Bannister did, one of the only clients that Bannister did have, it's like he didn't take private eye work, but one of the only clients he did have was Sergio Arcacho Smith's CRC, the Cuban Revolutionary Council. Mm-hmm. And he would vet anybody that wanted to join their organization just to make sure that they weren't, some sort of pro-Castro infiltrator. So yeah, it is, Bannister is still doing the same old thing that he always did. William Gaudet worked for the CIA for many years. He says that he saw Bannister deep in conversation with Oswald on Camp Street, and they obviously knew one another. So, there's about 7 folks I think I just covered. And then the hits keep coming, Delphine Roberts' daughter, whose name hilariously is Delphine Roberts, um, just like her mom, confirms that Oswald had an office upstairs on the second floor that she saw with all the flyers at 544 Camp Street. Mary Bringell, who did part-time work as a secretary for Bannister, says that Oswald had been in Bannister's office and she saw him. Who else? Consuela Martin worked part-time for Bannister as a Spanish translator, and she said that Oswald would often drop things off to be translated to her.
Wow.
So, I mean, she remembers Dan Campbell, just like Tommy Baumler, another guy that, college kid that was used to infiltrate leftist student groups, says that he recalled seeing Oswald use a phone at Bannister's office several times. So that's 10 people. And then you got Bannister, the folks that talk about Bannister's reaction when he's told about the 544 Camp Street stamp, right? So,
He gets
and,
upset.
and just quickly on that, because this is something that folks who are Warren Report critics, which I think all of us, it's safe to say, are, but something that I think we get wrong a lot, that I see critics get wrong a lot, is they say, "Oh, he's handing out all these different flyers with 544 Camp Street," and I'll even see um, basically fraudulent flyers that have this 544 Camp Street stamp on it that says "Hands off Cuba, 544 Camp Street."
Right.
It's like a big thing on the internet. That's somebody made that up. That's Photoshop. Okay.
Okay.
Now, all right. Yes, there is a 544 Camp Street stamp. Yeah, and it's incredibly incriminating for the official story, but it's only in one instance ever, and that is stamped on the inside of the Curtis Lamont Hands Off Cuba pamphlet, I believe it was, or I forget what it's called, the Crime Against Cuba. That's what it's called. So there are no flyers that have that all the flyers say Lee Oswald or say Fair Play for Cuba, PO Box, whatever, or Magazine Street or whatever.
Right.
But it's just this one. And what's awesome about that, not awesome, but like, I mean, incredibly interesting, let's say, is that and this is one of my, when I read this, this is one of those moments I'm just I stop. I'm like, we're laughing. I'm like, are you kidding me? This is ridiculous. So, okay. Corliss Lamont, he's handing out these pamphlets. It's like a 30-page pamphlet, okay? And we find out later that Clay Shaw's right-hand man, whose name escapes me at the moment. I'll come back. I'll find it. I'll come back to you. But basically, his right-hand man gets a copy. He grabs one of these from Oswald on the street, apparently, or somebody gives it to him, and he sees that it's got the 544 Camp Street. He circles 544 Camp Street, sends it in an envelope to the FBI. This guy's an FBI informant, and says, "Note the address stamped on the inside back."
Wow.
Okay.
Wow.
And I mean, that's huge. So you have an FBI informant going, "Hey, we got a problem here." Okay. And
Right.
here's what else is fun. So, and this is mildly speculative, but I think it's definitely worth noting. So this pamphlet, all right, it's not the age of home computers and printers, right? If you're going to have a 35-page color pamphlet, you have to order it from a print shop. And the way that works is, they have copies of the latest edition of whatever the pamphlet is. They pay the author and they take a cut, whatever. In 1963, the pamphlet was on its fourth edition. Okay, the fourth 1963 edition at the time Oswald was handing it out. We also, by the way, have no records of how Oswald obtained these pamphlets, and we have records of how Oswald obtained the flyers. Okay, we know we got all the details of that transaction. We have no idea where these pamphlets came from. Well, here's what's fun. All right, remember it's fourth edition is the time he's handing it out. The ones he was handing out were first edition. Okay. So you go, well, how could he get some first edition ones? That's weird. And then you find, via my man John Armstrong in the National Archives, a receipt where the CIA bought 45 first edition copies of The Crime Against Cuba, and they were sent to the CIA library in Langley, and they bought them in 1961. So that doesn't necessarily mean, maybe he found first edition copies somewhere else that were out of print. Maybe some other collector he came across at like an antique store or something. He's like, "Oh, I'd love," who knows? Or, it's also possible that he got them from the CIA.
Do we know specifically who the FBI informant sent that pamphlet to at the FBI? Because we know Bannister definitely had contacts still at the FBI,
Yes.
probably key allies there.
Come back to me in just a second. I'll give you a firm answer.
Okay. Mark, anything you want to add?
I mean, Matt covered the history of the pamphlets amazingly well. Not on that issue. Anything else you want to dive into as a kind of term?
Well, the connection between Bannister and Oswald, though, actually goes way back to when the Oswald that we know is in Russia. There's a person impersonating Oswald buying trucks, right, for the Friends of Democratic Cuba, which was Bannister was connected to that organization, correct?
Yeah, I mean, Matt, you can probably, there's a whole chapter on that in the Chokeholds book that we're co-authors on. So Matt, you cover that pretty well too.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm trying to look up who.
Well, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but no, you're right. There's 17 impersonations in your chapter.
Oh man, and you know what? There's actually like 50.
There's
like
lot.
50.
There's a lot.
There are more that I'm going to be covering. A whole just in between Mexico City and the assassination. There's like 20. I mean, it's crazy.
Right. Yeah, but it does go back further.
It's
Sean.
wild.
Yeah.
But yeah, the whole thing on the Bolton Ford incident is what that's known as.
Bolton Ford, yeah.
Basically, you've got two guys that go to buy Jeeps, and they say that they're, it's to help the Cuban exiles, and that's the Friends of Democratic Cuba. Now, what's interesting about that? So here's where it's fun. The Friends of Democratic Cuba, the two people that are the founders of that are Guy Bannister and Gerard Tujak. Now, who's Gerard Tujak? Does that name ring a bell? That's one of Oswald's employers in New Orleans. What are we doing? Like, what is that? So and again, so that's one thing is weird. We know it can't be Oswald because Oswald's in Minsk at the time. It's in 1962, so it's definitely not Oswald. But the guy says, no, you need to refer to me. My name's Lee Oswald. And he writes Lee Oswald he crosses out the other guy's name and he writes Lee Oswald on this slip, and they still have the slip. And the guy says that was Oswald. It looked like Oswald. And so we know it's not him. But what's interesting too is, Oswald's profile is that he's pro Castro Marxist, and yet the Friends of Democratic Cuba is an anti-Castro group, anti-communist group. So, he's being impersonated, but this is what's unique about this instance is that he's being impersonated in a pro-Castro. I'm sorry, he's being impersonated in an anti-Castro way, whereas all of the other impersonations of him, Ralph Yates, the Mercury dealership, the Sportstrom, those are all of him being anti-Castro, or I'm sorry, pro-Castro, which he ended up being. So Bolton Ford is kind of flipped. Is kind of what's different about that. Okay. Let's see. The guy's name is Jesse Core. Jesse Core. He's the one that sent the pamphlet, and he mailed it to the New Orleans FBI. It went to the head of the FBI in New Orleans. His name's Harry Maynor. And then Harry Maynor wrote to the FBI HQ, and he scratched out a handwritten note he had written that said several Fair Play for Cuba pamphlets contained address 544 Camp Street. He scratched it out, but he didn't scratch it out well enough to not be seen. So now it's obvious that he was trying to scratch it out. But I'm sure it's nothing.
Oh, I'm sure. It's nothing. I mean, it's a coincidence.
That's what you just have to believe everything's a coincidence. And it's like, I get it. Like I get it on the lone nut side. I get if there's just a few things, okay, to go like, yeah, let it go, man. Like it's just a few things.
To ignore all these witnesses. You just have to. Wow.
But once you dive into the case more and you learn and then you start to see the connectivity of things, you can see not only that there's something off, but you can see the hands in motion putting people into play. You can see, the Bannisters of it all, and the, later the Ruth Paynes of it all, DeMoore Shield. Yeah.
So let's get to that infamous incident with Jack Martin on the day of the assassination, and he has this confrontation with Bannister. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, I talked about it a little bit. It's you know, big picture. You can see the panic, right, from Bannister, Ferry, and even Clay Shaw. We'll talk about that in a second. The panic out of New Orleans, literally that day and through the weekend. So you have Bannister pistol whipping Jack Martin, his assistant, in his private investigative office, where not much work went on, but he was very familiar with his file system. And, you know, I was actually reading, it's possible that Jack Martin did take some of the files, maybe pertaining to Oswald, doesn't matter. But Bannister flipped his lid, as we know, on that evening, practically killed him with his pistol for looking around, asking questions. I think Martin said something like, "What are you going to kill me like you all killed Kennedy?" So then what's interesting about Martin after that incident is he stopped really talking about Bannister, probably out of fear for his life. Then he started calling the authorities, local and federal, all about David Ferry and what he knew about him, which
Wow.
obviously there's an immediate connection to Ferry and Bannister that was exposed right away. Garrison, well, we know Garrison interviewed Ferry that weekend about his trip to Texas. That all came from Jack Martin. So obviously it was put to bed for a few years, and then Garrison dug the case back up, thankfully. But yeah, so that was the panic of Bannister. Obviously, the leaflets we talked about, the 544 Camp Street. Ferry searching frantically for the library card and for the pictures, his trip to Texas, to just look for probably anything he could to erase his connection to Oswald. And then Clay Shaw, aka Clay Bertrand, trying to get legal representation for Oswald in custody in Dallas from some low-life sketchy lawyer, Dean Andrews.
Andrews, yeah.
I mean, what's the point of that? I mean, who gets that kind of representation in Texas from a New Orleans, minor, prostitutes, immigration stuff? Oh, go represent the president's accused assassin in Dallas, right?
Yeah, right.
Obviously, in a frantic attempt to erase and close any open doors back to New Orleans. And of course, that was taken care of, because obviously now you have Oswald there being on TV saying, "I'm a patsy." He starts talking, he's being interviewed. I mean, the panic really sets in, you know?
No, Matt, there's a police report on the incident, but it doesn't mention Jack Martin mentioned in the JFK assassination, correct?
Right. Yeah, it talks about long distance phone calls sort of being the focus of the fight. And Jack Martin supposedly was making long distance phone calls at G. Ray Gill's office too, that got David Ferry in trouble. So that's one of those things where it's like, yes, there is some evidence that he was making long distance phone calls, but that means that you have to believe that that's why he got pistol whipped, because he was making long distance phone calls. I mean, the other thing is Delphine Roberts told the HSCA that she thought the reason for the fight was that Martin had stolen files, right, from his. Now, she didn't specify what the files were. What we're talking about here is, what was the motive for Bannister to pistol whip Jack Martin on the night of the assassination? And my guess is it's probably a combination of a lot of things, right? I mean, he probably did mouth off some way to say, like, "Hey, I know you killed Kennedy. You're going to do that to me," type thing. And then
Yeah.
he probably was using long distance that he shouldn't have been using, and he might have stolen like, all of these things could be true. But I think probably the reason we talk about it is because it's in the movie. You know what I mean?
It's a great scene in the movie.
Iconic scene, because it's so early on too.
Yeah.
It helps to establish what's going on. Yeah.
Yeah, I just thought it was important that scene is great, but not many people know about the efforts that Jack Martin engaged in that weekend and the few days after to
Right.
let the authorities know about Ferry and Oswald. And he kind of just stopped talking about Bannister, probably thought he'd get, killed.
Yeah. And if I could just add to, one of the reasons that people say Jack Martin is not credible is because he changed his position to the HSCA, and he said all these things that he did not say in his initial police report. Okay. And so the question is, well, why would he do that unless he's just making it up later, right? And I think a case can be made that even though he had just been pistol whipped by Bannister, he didn't want to destroy Bannister and see him, go to prison for killing Kennedy, or be convicted of treason. And he was willing to keep his mouth shut for Bannister. After Bannister died, then those incentives went away. He had nothing to fear in terms of Bannister getting in trouble, and he might have been willing to speak freely. Now, he definitely was an alcoholic for sure, but alcoholics become privy to information too. So
Right. Where do we want to go from here, guys? Because there's a lot of stuff we could you know what? Let me ask you this. But Jack Martin did talk to Jim Garrison, correct?
yes.
And what did his talks with Garrison, does it back up what he would later say at the HSCA, or does it back up what he said at in the police report?
It's been a minute, so that's a specific question. Let me think about that.
Mark, do you know that or no?
No. I mean, I kind of am more familiar with Martin's activities, that right after Dallas, and getting the ball rolling on these characters we're talking about. One thought I was kind of shifting to, which could be kind of cool to go to touch on, is all the stuff we've talked about for the last 45 minutes or whatever shows in our book Chokeholds. There's 10 chapters that say, okay, it's undeniable in this chapter alone that there's a conspiracy to kill JFK. New Orleans and all this stuff isn't a chapter on its own in the book, because you do have the gap between New Orleans and Dallas with Mexico City, and connecting the New Orleans operation for sure to the murder in Dallas. But what we can say is it's undeniable, without question, based on everything we've talked about so far, that Oswald for sure was set up as a wanted to be looked as publicly as a pro-Castro communist sympathizer for some sort of operation to be used in the very near future. That turned out to be Dallas, as we know. But if you just look at New Orleans as a bubble, I think right now you could say Ferry, Shaw, Bannister, and others were instrumental in making that happen. Of course, in their connections with the DRE and the other anti-Castro groups there, it was perfectly set up. So that's the way I look at New Orleans, is it certainly made Dallas very possible.
That's a good point. Definitely.
So you'd love to say that the conspiracy in Dallas was hatched in New Orleans. I think it was more compartmentalized than that. They had a job there to create a legend, and kind of a Northwoods type. Okay, we have Oswald. We have a few other. Paul Blow in our book talks about prior plots and other similar Oswald personalities, and who are real people who could have done the same thing, took the same blame as Patsy. But there's I think it was part of an operation similar to Northwoods. Hey, if this happens, a major event, and then end up being Kennedy, unfortunately, we have an automatic cover story and a plan to blame it on Castro.
The other thing is Bannister and Ferry could have known. I mean, their job would have been maybe to set up Oswald as, a pro-Castro agent, not knowing what he was going to be used for, not necessarily that it was going to be used for the Kennedy assassination. And then happened, they actually, okay, we know what was going on. But the thing is, that doesn't necessarily mean that they were involved in the actual assassination of Kennedy, although Ferry's movements are very, very suspicious.
I think it was I think it was an oh shit moment, right? I mean,
sure.
It's like, okay, we know this guy very well, and now he's on national TV being accused of killing JFK, which they, of course, well, at least it's in the movie. We don't know how authentic those conversations were. We know they wanted to get rid of Castro for sure. The next best option would have been Kennedy, for being, with their view, very soft on Castro and Cuba.
Well, there is a couple witnesses to that party, correct?
Well, the party, yeah.
When Ferry and Oswald and Ferry and Shaw are talking about
Right.
killing
I think
Kennedy.
I think it became obvious to them that their role in New Orleans ended up being developing to a point of seriousness for sure in Dallas, and there was the panic, you know.
Sure.
And we would like to thank our sponsor, Gracious Day Grains. Sean, you like to eat healthy, don't you?
Always, buddy. I try to eat healthy as much as I can.
Yeah, and there is nothing healthier than what they call like farm to table, right? So when you can get something right from the ground and make it and then put it right on your table. And Gracious Day Grains, they have a tremendous selection, and it's totally organic. Everything is, they don't use any sort of herbicides or pesticides or anything like that. They have a bunch of different products on their website, Gracious Day Grains. So if you go to graciousdaymilling.com, you'll find a bunch of great stuff there, Sean.
Yeah, you will, Billy. And it's owned by Tom Maxey, who's a great guy from Virginia. He's a truth seeker, just like me and you, buddy. And Tom's growing philosophy follows the wisdom of farmers of centuries past. And a quote from Tom is, "If we practice the right rotations, we exclude the bugs and weeds without needing herbicides or pesticides." So, I mean, this is great, Billy. I mean, what he's doing is fantastic.
There's cornbread mix, there's cornmeal, popcorn he sells, buckwheat Sean, have you had buckwheat pancakes?
No, buddy.
Oh my, they're delicious. I love buckwheat pancakes. And Gracious Day Grains sells buckwheat pancakes. Just go to their website and you'll be able to find all of this stuff there. You can order it right off the website. You can find out all about how they farm and their whole philosophy, Tom's philosophy. It's great stuff.
It really is, Billy. And one of the things he does is he grinds small batches at very low temperatures, which retains the flavor and the freshness.
Of course. And it can't get any fresher than that. I mean, it's literally right from the ground. So again, go to graciousdaymilling.com and just, take a look on there. You can order whatever you want and they'll send it right to your door. Again, it doesn't get any fresher than that, right from Tom's farm to your door, to your table. So
absolutely. And eat healthy and you'll feel better.
Absolutely. I wish I could do that. I wish I could eat healthier, Sean.
We'll start with Tom's stuff, buddy.
I'm going to order some of those buckwheat pancakes. I love.
There you go. I'm going to try them too, Billy.
Yeah, they're really good. All right, Gracious Day. We thank Gracious Day Grains for their sponsorship.
Thank you.
That's best case. That's the most innocent explanation of it, really.
And then you also got to put Sergio Kacha-Smith in this, and of course, his name comes out in the Rose Cheramie incident, where him and Emilio Santana were according to Rose Cheramie, going to Dallas to kill Kennedy. And here's Sergio Kacha-Smith, who ties the Bannister and Ferry.
Yes, absolutely. And Rose Cheramie, which I haven't covered yet, I'll be doing that next season. But it's been in my outline for a while. That's a big one. Her story is very, very credible because there are multiple touch points of corroboration. These people kidnapped her child and had him, some ship was coming in with a drug deal and she knew all this information. It's crazy. To answer your question, it looks like Jack Martin did tell basically his affidavit for Jim Garrison was consistent with what he later said to the HSCA. So that would be, but it was not consistent with what he told the police the first night with the police report. So
if we trust the police said what's actually in there.
Yeah. And hey, if I could just quickly on the plot really of the movie JFK and the point of the Garrison case, what we're to believe is that the official story as it's argued, right? So in law, you say, motion to dismiss is even if everything you're saying is true, this case is still gonna get dismissed, right? So even if everything Garrison's saying is true, like what is he really saying? That this guy Perry Russo who indisputably is a friend, acquaintance of David Ferrie. There's no doubt about that. I hung out with him on multiple occasions, many witnesses. He's not just fabricating that. But assuming everything he's saying is true, all he's saying is, I was at a party and I saw Clay Shaw and Lee Oswald with a beard. Okay, maybe he had a beard, I don't know. But and who else? David Ferrie, Clay Shaw, and Lee Oswald talk about triangulation, killing Kennedy, some details like that. But they don't lay out, he doesn't allege that there were, that they said they were going to do it on this day and that they had this, there's not sufficient detail for it to be more than just mere hyperbole to me, is kind of my view. And then the other thing is what is he arguing? Well, he's saying that Oswald is involved. I mean, the argument is Oswald is involved in the assassination. It's a conspiracy with multiple people involved, but Oswald's one of the shooters. I mean, the evidence that I've studied in depth, about 20 hours a week over the last 3 years, is that Oswald was not on the 6th floor.
No.
And so Oswald is some sort of asset, and he's in the game, no doubt. This raises the question potentially of, the Oswald impersonator, right? The whole Harvey and Lee thing.
Right. Sure.
And whether it's multiple people and it's sort of like a legend with multiple people using the name, or whether it's the same person who looks similar, it could be something like that. But yeah, to me, I'm grateful for all the work that Garrison did in bringing forth just the evidence, the witness statements, the information. But if I was on that trial, I don't know that I could have convicted Clay Shaw for the murder of Kennedy based on what was alleged even.
Well, we also got to throw in that the CIA did a really good job of destroying his case. I mean, they really, they attacked him, and the media did a hatchet job on Jim Garrison. Absolutely destroyed him.
Yeah, and I'll tell you,
they infiltrated his investigation.
Yes,
CIA. I mean,
going into this, I was a full-throated, like 1,000% team Jim Garrison guy. Jim Garrison can do no wrong. Everything that went wrong was basically, the bad guys trying to get him, and the CIA, infiltrating him, or whatever it was. And the reality is, it's a little bit of everything. It's a mixed bag. It's just not as clean. So what you're saying is definitely true. CIA was absolutely infiltrating. Who's the whistleblower with the great mustache? Victor Marchetti, CIA whistleblower. Sure. He said he was in a meeting at CIA where they met about Clay Shaw's defense and how vigorously should they defend him. And these people all have intelligence ties that are trying to throw the case. These people who are working for Garrison flip on him. Jim Fallon is one of the guys that's well known that did that. But the problem is Garrison made some real mistakes.
Yes.
That's the challenge, and he wasn't perfect. I mean, there's the legal mistakes, but two things Garrison did that blew my mind that I'd never heard before, that I think we have to come to terms with, is that before the trial happened, he did these wild favors for Perry Russo, just wild. And I think you can't say with good faith that wouldn't have made Perry Russo feel like he has to repay the favor. So what did he do? Perry Russo had a friend who got kicked out of LSU. Jim Garrison called the governor and got his friend reinstated. Done. Wow. This is months before the trial. Perry Russo had another friend who who had been drafted to go to Vietnam and was trying to get out of service. And there's a rule, I guess, if you have a criminal trial pending against you, you get out of your draft service. And Garrison fabricated a false charge against Russo's friend so that he could avoid service in the Vietnam War.
Wow.
So that really undermines Jim Garrison. So I think Jim Garrison was like a lot of prosecutors. He was trying to win his case. Sure. And I've talked to the person who studied this the most in depth, like recently, aside from like the greats, is I think Jeff Crudell. On his podcast, The Enduring Secret, he's got about 35 episodes on New Orleans, and he goes so on everything you're talking about, the CIA infiltrator folks, and he goes real deep, Gordon Novel and all the whole sub.
Sure.
There's man, it's not just the case, it's the case, and it's the appeal, and it's the perjury charges, and then it's the defamation lawsuits, and it's a jumble of stuff. But what we see at the bottom line is that Jim Garrison was a little bit of an unscrupulous prosecutor, but I don't think he was doing it but I think he also thought he was onto something, and I think he was onto something.
He was.
It's just that Clay Shaw was too many clicks away from he was like 1 or 2 clicks away from the center of the thing, but he was definitely, without a doubt, Clay Shaw's a career CIA asset.
Absolutely.
And then there was key evidence that wasn't allowed also, right? I mean,
yes.
Yeah.
Well,
Yes.
the Clay Bertrand, the whole
Right.
thing, Shaw said he's Bertrand, right? The whole
Right.
alias wasn't allowed.
Yeah,
I
I mean, it
Garrison-
wasn't for some reason admitted by the court as evidence, but we know the fingerprint card had the admitted alias, and so it doesn't even matter at this point. But yeah, that was weird. I think we can all agree when it comes to the Garrison case, the fact that David Ferry wound up dead before Shaw was indicted was a dagger to his case.
Yes,
It was,
sure.
absolutely. I think Garrison's one of his greatest faults is just being too trustworthy. I mean, he trusted so many people that just, infiltrated, stealing files from him, and just, he put him on the stand, and they make him. Wasn't the one guy said his daughter was abducted by the government? Or remember that one?
Yeah, the accountant.
Yeah,
I think it's the accountant.
Yeah. So I mean, there's just so many different things. But when you talk about, let's talk about the death of David Ferry, and of course Bannister dies right before the Warren Commission came out, right in '64.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, let's get to the Ferry one, because that like you said, Mark, that really destroyed Garrison's case.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, its chances of convicting. Well, who knows if Ferry would have been indicted too? I don't know, Matt, if you have feelings on that, or if he just would have been Garrison's best witness. Because
he would have been indicted.
Huh?
I think he would have been indicted. Yeah.
And he would have had to answer under oath for all that crazy stuff he was doing on the weekend of the assassination. We already talked about. So yeah, that was. I mean, at that point, Garrison felt like he needed to, indict someone and make a case, and I think Garrison proved that there was a conspiracy. Just getting to, like Matt said, to Clay Shaw was too difficult, but I think he easily proved a conspiracy in New Orleans to create what Oswald was and what he became, and now how it was used in Dallas, and connecting Shaw to that. That's what the jury couldn't get to,
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, Ferry, he finds out that they're reinvestigating the case, and he dies on February 22nd, which is just a week after it became public that they were investigating the case. And he had basically said, you know what this means? This makes me a dead man. That's what he told one of Garrison's investigators. They found 2 notes there. I'm sorry, they found 2 things there that made it look like a suicide. His will. Okay, everybody's got a will, so I don't know how much that makes it look like a suicide. And then a note where Ferry kind of said something vaguely hinting at, leaving this world, but it wasn't clear that it was a suicide note. But then the official ruling was that he died of natural causes. So it's like, was it a suicide? Was it natural causes? So it was a berry aneurysm was the official ruling. I mean, the challenge is, you could tell me that anything's natural causes, but when the guy goes before the church committee and he goes, "Hey, this is the heart attack gun," maybe I'm sure it was an aneurysm. Maybe they have an aneurysm gun. Sure, I'm not arguing that that's not literally what it was, but what caused it, that's that timing. It's just how many. What's your coincidence tolerance? I guess. I have somewhat of a coincidence tolerance. I'll accept some coincidences. They're great. Coincidences happen, but not this many all in the same way all the time at the exact time. Okay, it's just too much.
And what was the official cause of Bannister's death?
Heart attack.
Heart attack.
I think it was 8 months after Dallas. Yeah.
I'm
Wow.
sure. Yeah. Yeah. Who knows? I mean, you can argue it's one of those things. It's like, yeah, they might they might have got him, or maybe he just died from stress. That's plausible too. I mean, but not the Ferry one. The Ferry one, yeah, maybe Ferry would have died from stress eventually, but not a week after he said they're about to kill me.
You're right. Exactly.
Well, even Bannister made a comment to an associate on November 22nd, something to the effect like, "Don't be surprised if I end up dead in a week."
Well,
So,
Yeah, you can see panic set in with these guys, and they're
yeah.
out scrambling. I mean, it's amazing what was going on.
they don't want to get Roselli'd,
Yeah,
cut up in a
it's
bin.
kind of hard to say it was a suicide, Roselli.
Yeah.
One other
Like-
thing, if it's okay, I wanted, because I just put it in some notes here where I do find a strong connection from Dallas back to New Orleans. Is what was the group that Oswald was so public with in New Orleans towards the end of his time there? The Carlos Bringuer group. That's the DRE, right?
Yes.
Okay, so the public altercation. Well,
Mhm.
segue to that. Oswald's arrested for a minor scuffle in New Orleans, and who did you get to meet with for like 90 minutes while in jail? Like an FBI agent. It was Kennedy or DeBreeze, right?
Right.
Anyways, getting back to the DRE. So they're heavily involved in the later stages of Oswald's pro-Castro communist image, right? So that part's done. The interview on TV, the staging and the leafleting and all that. So he leaves and goes back towards Dallas, Mexico City happens and all that. On the afternoon of the assassination, within hours, which group was the first one chomping at the bit to release Oswald's background to the world? Which one? The DRE group out of New Orleans,
Right.
right?
Right.
They were in contact with George Joannides, begging him to let it out. He said, "No, wait an hour." They waited an hour and it was out. So they knew, they may not have known what they were doing in New Orleans was directly connected to Dallas, but they knew him so well, and they knew this was their green light Northwoods type moment to get Castro for good because of his background.
Yeah, and I mean, the WDSU, that's the TV station that has the famous footage of Oswald passing out flyers. They also have the footage of him, on these debate shows. They were totally consumed with FBI informants. So the cameraman is an FBI informant. Jesse Core calls the cameraman, Clay Shaw's right-hand man. He sees Oswald handing out these flyers, calls his cameraman informant from WDSU, who's an FBI informant, comes down to take video. Bill Stuckey is an FBI informant who's the host of the show Conversation Carte Blanche that Oswald went on. And he's on that show with a CIA informant, Ed Butler. Right. And the hits keep coming. Oh, and so Oswald, this is this is another one of these things I read and I go, this can't, when I go to, before I put the episode out and I'm just reading through again, I had to triple check this citation because I'm like, this can't be true. This is ridiculous. This is too fantastical. The guy that Oswald randomly paid to help him hand out flyers in this WDSU TV, you can see there's Oswald and another guy handing flyers out. Well, that guy's name's Charles Steele. And Oswald, the story is Oswald met him in front of the unemployment office and said, "Hey, can I pay you, $5 to hand out flyers for just a few minutes?" Okay. First of all, where's he getting the money from? Second of all, why would you do it for just a few minutes? Well, because you're about to be on TV. Why else would he do it? So here's where it gets fun. Charles Steele is an FBI informant.
Wow.
Okay, he's an FBI informant. And then here's where it gets even better. They bring him in from the HSCA. The investigators go talk to Charles Steele, and they ask him if he knew Oswald before that, if he was aware of who Oswald was before he met him with the flyers. And he said, no comment, or I plead the fifth type thing.
Wow.
Wow.
So everybody, it's like a Truman Show situation in New Orleans.
Right.
I mean, there's like 11 people, and anything that has, Bringuer, all these guys, they're all FBI informants, Sergio Concha-Smith, CIA, like they're all there, and it's
And there's some evidence that Oswald may have been an FBI informant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oswald was an FBI informant from there's a guy who basically said he was asked to look into that before the FBI agent went to go visit Oswald in jail. Hang on, I can get you the exact information. But yeah, he looked and saw that he was an FBI informant, I believe, on multiple matters.
And I think it was Schweiker that said that Ruby was an FBI informant.
I believe that.
That's Enough Out of You is sponsored by Carfecta, Scranton's premier destination for finding the vehicle of your dreams. With a commitment to service, value, and selection, Carfecta is your trusted partner in every step of your auto purchase journey. Our sales staff will work with you to select the perfect vehicle from our diverse inventory. Our friendly office staff will assist you in securing financing and offering warranties. At Carfecta, our dedicated team is here to make your car buying experience seamless and satisfying. Located in Scranton, Pennsylvania at 220 South 7th Avenue, or call us at 272-770-0080 and check us out on Facebook. With years of experience serving the area, our dealership is dedicated to offering high-quality pre-owned vehicles to our customers. From the moment you walk through our door, we're committed to providing you with a great car buying experience. With our skilled sales staff and financing options, we'll help you get the vehicle you want at the great price you deserve. Visit Carfecta today and let us exceed your expectations. That's Enough Out of You is also sponsored by Case Quattro Winery, featuring over 20 flavors of wine, from dry red, dry white, and fruit for your sampling pleasure. Case Quattro Winery offers entertainment, parties, and private events. Now serving a full menu with a little something for everyone, including appetizers, salads, dinners, pizza, and desserts. Case Quattro has some of the best live entertainment in the area, with comedy and karaoke nights and live bands. Check us out on Facebook and Instagram for all of our upcoming events. And if you mention the code OUTA, that's OUTTA, you get 15% off of your order. Located on Main Street in Peckville, Pennsylvania, call 570-382-3855 for more information. And we thank Case Quattro Winery for their support.
I mean, we could do a deep dive on here, like when you think about all this stuff that the FBI is realizing what's going on, the CIA is doing, and then you think of the big picture, like Hoover at some point, even though I don't think there's any evidence that Hoover was involved in any of this planning or anything. I don't know if you guys agree, but at some point, Hoover had to figure out pretty early that this was some kind of operation. And he knew pretty early that weekend, in my opinion, that there was some kind of intelligence plot against Kennedy.
Are you talking about the weekend of November 22nd?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Hoover knew as soon as he found out about Mexico City. I mean, which is
Right.
That's the thing I've been deep in recently. But Hoover certainly knew what was going on, and he knew the CIA was up to shenanigans. He tells LBJ on the phone, and of
Sure.
course they delete the recording, but they transcribed part of it, and they still have it, and they've released it. And the part they transcribed is brutal for the official story. It's just
Yeah.
LBJ. It's
Neither one of them believed it.
Yeah, and not to get too far off track, but I just want to get on this road just because it's kind of the main point. Hoover tells LBJ, hey, he tells him two things. This guy Lee Oswald is going around visiting the Soviet embassy and the Cuban embassy. He tells him this after the assassination. He's like, Oswald visited the Soviet and the Cuban embassy. So that part of it is like, wow. So he must be tied with the Soviets and the Cubans. Then the next thing Hoover tells him, which is more important, is he goes, but it turns out the person that said they were Oswald was a second person down there. It was an imposter.
The voice didn't match.
So yeah, so then we have more audio tape of LBJ talking to Senator Russell,
Right.
trying to cajole him to be on the Warren Commission, and he tells him the whole thing of I want to tell him, he tells him how he got Earl Warren on board, which was, well, I told him about a little incident down in Mexico City that Hoover told me about, and what he means is Oswald going around to the Soviet and Cuban consulates, and Oswald being tied to the Soviets basically,
Right.
but he omits the main point of the whole thing, which is that wasn't Oswald, which he was
Right.
told and he knew.
Right.
So there's your proof right there that LBJ is lying
Sure.
about something. I mean, that's wild. Quickly back to to Oswald being an FBI informant. He Oswald calls the FBI office, and actually he hands a phone number to Francis Martello, the New Orleans PD, and says, "Hey, you call this number at the FBI." Of course, he already had the number, which that implies, a lot in and of itself. And then this guy, John Quigley, Agent Quigley, says he's going to come and meet with Oswald. Before Quigley leaves, he asked this clerk, William Walter, to find out if Oswald's an FBI informant. And Walter checks and he says, yes, he was an FBI informant, and he was for multiple different cases.
Wow.
So yeah, there it is. Now, the counterpoint is that this FBI agent just made the story up, which happens to fit exactly in with all these. I mean, so that's, you just have to, and at some point I'm going to do a debate. I've been challenged to a debate by Fred Litwin. So that'll be in October or November. But I actually agree with Fred Litwin on a fair amount of things that are related to New Orleans. But the main points, I don't. And I just want to get my head around, like, okay, so you just would say this FBI agent whistleblower is not telling the truth. Why do you think all these people are lying?
Right.
Like, what are their incentives? And that's just that's a split in inferences. It really is. It's just, I think some people defer to authority, and some people may say, I'm a little more skeptical of authority. But to me, this is beyond reasonableness at this point. So, yeah.
There's a couple of things I want to isolated incidents that I want to talk about. Let's talk about the home in Louisiana, the weapons, and they were stolen.
Yeah, Homa, and it's not Huma. Oh my gosh, I got a lot of feedback. Homa, and it's Schlumberger. It's not
Right.
Schlumberger. But yeah, basically there's this munitions bunker for this company that did blasting for wells in the Gulf. And they did other things. They were tied to the French government. And long story short, they had a bunker of explosives and ammunition, stuff like that, and it was stolen. And supposedly it's this. We learn all this from Gordon Novel, sort of the main one who tells this story, but other people verify it. And it's a Gordon Novel, Sergio Arcacha Smith, David Ferry. Bannister doesn't go, but they bring all the goods back to Bannister's office.
The office,
And
right.
then there's a New Orleans newspaper article where they talk about seeing all of the the weapons and the bombs in in the back rooms of Bannister's office. So yeah. Now the question with that one is, what was the purpose of it? And there's this whole conversation about Bannister had a letter of marque, which allowed him to which he went to DC and he got this special permission to rob this thing, and if he got caught, he could show this document. I don't know, I can't verify that one way or the other, but I think it definitely happened. I know that Garrison tried to subpoena or not subpoena. He tried to, I forget the word I'm looking for, extradite Arcacha Smith from Texas on the Schlumberger raid, but basically the Texas Dallas police wouldn't cooperate, and Governor Connolly wouldn't cooperate. So,
Mark, anything you want to add on that?
No, I actually made some notes on the, we talked about Homa, the Clinton Jackson incident. That's just really not much going into there, other than it's just more a very strange, isolated incident of Shaw, Ferry, and Oswald being seen doing multiple things up there.
Right.
And it just was very bizarre. It just kind of ties all to the same things we're talking about. I did want to, just thinking big picture here, I don't know how much more time we have, But a lot of the things we're talking about tonight, in my opinion, are one of many reasons why the remaining JFK files are still in the protected collection, and why the CIA is fighting so hard to keep them secret to this day. It'll be an election issue. I think we're seeing that play out because we know Bobby Jr. and Trump are committed to doing it. And I think they'll be able to do it. I don't know how the election's going to play out, but
Well,
that's
he said that before, though. Do we really believe he's going to do it
well.
again?
I think well, that's a whole thing, because Trump was pressured at the 11th hour back in 2017 by the CIA and some faulty legal advice in terms of having to. But I think he's been more educated. He's now whether he can do it, whether he can stand up and tell the CIA, no, we're gonna do it this time. I don't care what you say. He apparently has seen what was so sensitive, but there's also, I saw this week, a congressman out of, I want to say, Memphis. His name's Cohen, is starting putting forward some legislation to get the ARB kick started again.
Yeah.
So that's exciting, where they can go in as an independent agency of civilians and finish the job that the ARB did in the 1990s, which would be the exact way to do it, where it takes the matter back out of the agency's hands and puts it where it should be, with an independent agency established by Congress, which is how the JFK Act was set up. So that's good. But I think that a lot of this stuff about New Orleans and this intelligence agent operation gone wrong, both with the things we've talked about with the DRE, the connections to Oswald in New Orleans, and the immediate release of his information. Then you throw Mexico City in, like you mentioned, Sean, and I think Hoover and LBJ immediately said, too much to see here. We got to go lone nut and cover this up.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. I would just say that, it appears to me what was, and this is a little bit speculative. I like to have every single thing I say footnoted, but at the end of the day, you're going to have to make some educated guesses in this case. It seems like they had a false flag set up against Oswald so that they could get the war they wanted with the Soviet Union. Okay. And then LBJ gets in there and he goes, let's not end it all. I'm in charge now. I'd like to be president of something instead of just like nuclear ashes. So you guys just go bomb Vietnam. It'll be fine. That kind of seems to be what happened.
Yeah.
The nutshell of it,
Yeah, I agree. It was set up as a Northwoods type thing, but once they saw immediately with Oswald stuff all over the news and then Mexico City problems, there's no way they could have used that as a pretext to go into Cuba. Just no way.
Well, what's great about Mexico, sorry, we're getting off of Mexico City, but what's great about it is it's the perfect explanation for why good people would lie in the case.
Sure.
Because everyone's being told.
War.
Yeah, it's like,
it sets up, what John Newman calls a virus. It sets up the,
exactly,
the cover up.
Yeah. And, everything's compartmentalized, so people may not know what the significance of what they're doing anyway. They're told to research this discrete issue. They don't know what outcome they're going for necessarily. But they may be told, hey, you need to be on this outcome. It needs to be like this, so it doesn't look like the Soviets did it. But that's a boogeyman there that will let people go, hey, we knew something was wrong, but it was because the Soviets. We could tell something was off. This isn't our normal procedure, but you understand we're trying to save lives.
Sure.
Like I see how that's a very useful tool. I would just add one thing on the Clinton Jackson incident. The thing to me, so there are a lot of witnesses here with that see Oswald with Shaw and Ferry. But the thing that was, and by the way, they don't see somebody who looks like Clay Shaw or who looks like Oswald. They have Oswald's ID. Yeah, they write his name's in the book. He writes it down. The cop goes over and talks to Clay Shaw and he says, "I'm with the International Trademark. My name's Clay Shaw."
His ID. This is a voter registration drive.
Yeah,
right?
and that cop remembers. He testifies under oath. Yes, that's the guy I saw. He said he was with the International Trademark, and the registrar Henry Palmer says that on that same day, he was told that the guy in the limo, Clay Shaw, was with the International Trade Mart. It was not a new thing. He was told that right away.
Right.
The fact that gives me confidence that all of that stuff is absolutely authentic and I cannot be persuaded otherwise is the common thread of everyone saying the same story, which is Oswald was looking for a job at the Eastern Louisiana Hospital. Okay.
Right.
What a weird thing for all these different people to lie about. So the barber is lying about that. Is that what we're saying?
Right.
And then he sends them to Reeves Morgan, the state rep. And now we're saying that Reeves Morgan is lying about Oswald coming to see him. Reeves Morgan says go see Henry Palmer to register. Now we're saying Henry Palmer's lying.
Right.
The constable or whatever, the sheriff that goes over and talks to Shaw and says he sees Oswald. Now we're saying that he's lying too. And now we're saying also that the two people that are at the hospital itself are lying. But that to me, that's more of a conspiracy than what we're saying. We're just saying, here's all the witness statements. To believe those witness statements aren't true, you would have to have some sort of explanation for how they were all able to corroborate, to all have the same story. I don't know what that explanation could be. That's all.
What do you guys feel about the reason for trying to get him a job there? Do you feel that, because I know that it's been brought up that maybe they would change that from an employee to a patient?
Yeah.
There's been speculation on that.
Yeah, so I talked to Crudell about this, and people don't know Jeff Crudell is like a CEO of multiple hospitals. So he's actually like this big executive. And he says there's no way that could ever happen. Like there's not gonna, they wouldn't switch. What I think it could be is they just wanted him to get his face. I honestly, I don't even know. I don't know. I don't know. And I asked Eugenio and he doesn't know.
Right.
And nobody's got a great answer for why he was trying to do that. But the fact of that he was trying to get that job is the common thread and the key to that. So either all these people someone had to have told them to make that story up, or they're just reporting what they saw.
Mark, do you have a thought on that? What they were actually doing?
Well, I mean, I heard a rationale once that it could have been related to the quote unquote medical cancer experiments they were doing, and maybe I don't believe that. What is interesting though, it's the same hospital, correct me if I'm wrong, that Rose Cheramie was admitted after November 22nd. Wow. Yeah,
that's true.
Yeah.
Wow.
So no, I really don't. I mean, it could have just been to just create more of a public, but there's not a connection though to the Castro stuff there. Matt's right. I mean, Shaw was ID'd. Oswald was ID'd. He introduced himself as Lee Oswald. Why? I know this though. When he was being asked like who he knew at the hospital, I'm talking about Oswald. He dropped the names of two doctors, I think, that worked there. One of them, was it Silva, Matt?
Yeah, I didn't go super deep down that road, but yes,
he was a Cuban connected to the DRE in New Orleans.
Yes, that's true. So that might be it.
Wow.
And there's the other thing is there's like a nearby training, like Cuban exile training camp, something farms. I forget the name of it. Again, I'll be diving deeper on that next year, but this could all be tied into that. I mean, this is just a never-ending thread. But for my purposes, I was just focused on like, is it true that Oswald and Ferry and Shaw were together? And yeah, I think so. I mean, I bet my life on it that Oswald was there. Okay. Right. Shaw, all these people testified. I would say I'm 98% sure of that. Ferry's actually the one that's got the weakest evidence. There's only like 3 or 4 witnesses that saw Ferry. There's like 8 or 9 that saw Oswald, and there's 6 that saw Shaw. Right. But still, how do you mistake Ferry? So.
Yeah, wasn't there one witness said I see someone in a phone booth. He had the craziest hair I'd ever seen.
Yes. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So, guys, there's one incident I want to talk about. The Donald Norton Atlanta airport. You want to go into that, Matt? Because that's just a fascinating story.
Yeah, I think I can do this one off the dome. So this guy Donald Norton, who I believe was a CIA asset of some sort. He was giving funds to somebody in Cuba, and he met with his contact who was giving him the money in the Atlanta airport, and this guy's name was Hugh Ferris. So Hugh Ferris gives him the briefcase, and he remembered that he had bushy eyebrows and like a weird wig. And then years later, he sees the same guy in a bar in New Orleans, and it turns out Hugh Ferris is David Ferry.
Wow.
You know,
Amazing.
that's a one-off. So this is kind of, it's one of those ones that's like a cherry on top for me. It's like,
Right. Sure.
crazy.
Sure.
But it confirms everything, you know, and it's that's why I know you don't want to talk about this one, but the Judith Ferry Baker is a tough one because she confirms so many other points, but then there's also some conflicting stuff. So it's
Yeah. See,
those ones are tough.
that's the problem with me with that is there's so many of the conflicting ones that it's.
But I just think you look at those and you go, it's okay to be open to not knowing for sure. I think, but because there's enough that we can know for sure,
Right.
you know, to point us in the right direction. So yeah.
So guys, we've been going over an hour and a half here. This has been great. Thank you. This has been perfect. We covered just about everything I wanted to, but is there anything that you guys want to add?
Yeah, I would just say our book, JFK Assassination Chokeholds, we'll have an audio book out this fall, the next few months.
Yeah.
And also my podcast, Solving JFK, wrapping up season 2 right now on who was Oswald. Really just finished Mexico City. I'll be having John Newman on to talk Mexico City recap and rebuttals here in a few weeks. I'm excited about that. And then I'm getting into like the exciting stuff of, you know, October and November, Oswald's life leading up to the assassination in 1963. So yeah, that's keeping me busy. And I'll have one more fully produced research season with these produced episodes, trying to find out if not Oswald, then who. And we'll keep rolling with it. And hopefully we'll get these files, some of these files disclosed. I mean, I would say on that topic that even if I don't believe Kamala Harris will disclose the files, period, full stop. I think it's possible that Trump would disclose the files because he gets benefit from his base for it, doing that at this point, just from a sheer political calculation. But I also think that if he does disclose the files, I wouldn't put it past if there are any smoking gun documents or documents that are like the documents that get the feds in trouble are the ones that are, you know, not clear. There's several connections out and we can put them all together. But if there's anything that's a smoking gun, and you better believe that for them to keep holding it on for this long, you would expect that that's the deal. I just think they'll destroy it.
Yeah,
I think
really.
the second Trump says we're gonna release it, they just go delete, burn. I mean, that's what happened with the ARRB. They asked for records of all from the Secret Service of all of the protocols from the fall of 1963, and the Secret Service had the documents and they destroyed them as the ARRB was coming to pick them up. So I think these agencies are treacherous. They're the enemy of the people. And I think that, you know, it's going to take people to understand that that's the case and to lose that naivety of thinking that these agencies whose job it is to do whatever they want in an unaccountable fashion are ever going to follow the law. I don't. So that's my nihilistic perspective.
Mark, you got anything else?
Yeah, just to close the loop on that. I mean, what Trump or Harris can do is follow the law. So if there are 5 or 10 records still in the protected collection that do in fact pose a threat to our country, intelligence-wise, law enforcement, foreign relations, they have the authority to continue classifying that record. But I don't want to get into the weeds there, but the problem is so to expect a full-blown release of everything, that's not really what I think most of us are seeking. It's just you can't just keep 5,000 records back and say, you know, when we feel like it type thing. And what Biden did is he empowered the agencies to do that. I mean, he went in direct, you know, about face from the JFK Act, but we'll see what happens with that. I think we're more optimistic than ever and we'll see what's in there. I think I touched earlier on what I think is included in those files, including the Joe Anides files that Jeff Morley has fought so hard to wrangle away from the CIA. Yeah, I mean the Chokeholds book is a good read because, and we didn't talk about it too much, I think, on prior shows, but it's just a clinical review of the historical record. There's not any speculation. It's just, hey, here's what we know now that we didn't know back then. And we picked 10 different topics that we believe beyond any doubt show a conspiracy in the case. And they're all different. It's medical, it's
Right.
Oswald, it's, obstruction of justice that we've seen for 60 years. So we're proud of it. And it's like Matt said, there's going to be an audiobook. So for those of you that want to listen in the car or work or whatever you're doing, that'll be good to have.
And Matt, I would just say that you held up the book before, but we're not going to see it because you have to be talking in order for your video to be. So go ahead and talk and hold it up.
JFK Assassination Chokeholds, as recommended by Oliver Stone. Hey, come check it out.
There you go.
And I'll add that you guys co-authored that with Jim DeGenio and Paul Blow.
Yes.
Yeah, fantastic. And of course, right. And we'll have we have that on our bookshop, and we'll have a link to that. And then, of course, your podcast, Solving JFK, Matt, we'll have a link to that, and make sure that everybody's aware how to get your podcast and everything. And I'm hoping that, and I'm pretty sure that most of our audience is probably crossover with yours. I think pretty similar in that respect. So, Sean, anything before we wrap it up?
No, I mean, is there anything you guys want to say on Bannister and Ferry just to wrap it? Because I think we covered so much good ground. I mean, I think there's no doubt that they had a connection with Oswald. I don't think anybody could deny that. There's so many witnesses, and both, the death of Ferry is so suspicious. I mean, the timing of that thing is just, and like you said, Mark, it destroyed Garrison's case.
Yeah, Bannister was paying Oswald to hand out those flyers, which is what Oswald told Dean Dean Andrews. Right. And that's consistent with, here's the thing. If somebody said, hey, this guy paid me to hand these things out, you'd be like, okay, sure. I'm sure this guy paid you to hand those things out. Okay. But if that guy's whole life, he's, worked with people who are infiltrating leftist groups, so what's he doing? He's working with a person trying to infiltrate a leftist group. It's the same thing he's always done. It's Occam's razor. It's the least stretch, the least amount of a stretch. So yeah, and we can go on and on and on, but Bannister, definitely, Oswald worked with Bannister. And Ferry's super tied into the Cubans, and he's tied into Bannister as it relates to fighting Castro. And Arcacha Smith is the point that brings them all together, who's like Ferry's best friend. So without a doubt, Oswald knew them, and Oswald's at the training camps, as evidenced by 3 people who saw the video or the film that's now disappeared. So there's your evidence. I mean, we could put this up in court and people could look at it, and that may not all be admissible evidence, but the point is, that's the whole point of the show. Like, I'm not going into a Facebook group and arguing with some guy and having a 50 comment thread. I'm not playing that game. I'm just laying out the points for a reasonable average person, right? Because people who are dug in. It's over for them. Anyway. All right, well, thanks guys for having us. Appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys.
All right, go Irish, John.
Thanks, guys.
Go Florida State, buddy.
We'll see.
Cheers.
Turn it around.
All right, guys. Good night.
All right.
Good night.
Night.
That's Enough Out of You podcast is executive produced and written by Bill Rader and Sean Kane, and edited by Bill Rader. The That's Enough Out of You podcast and logo are exclusive property of Bags of Chicken, LLC. Any rebroadcast, retransmission, or accounts of this podcast without the express written consent of Bags of Chicken, LLC is prohibited. So don't even try it.